On this evening's panel discussion, we welcome a special guest, Minister of Finance and the Public Sector, Dr. Nigel Clarke. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And as we jump right in here, the complaints already there. Individuals from, of course, the opposition, economists, and various citizens have been making their complaints. One of the biggest complaints has been, well, we understand that COVID is bad, we understand the impact it has had. However, more people are dying from crime than they are from COVID. So why not put the funds more towards crime than towards COVID? So I'd just like you to explain from your position and your thinking why you prioritized what you did prioritize and how much crime actually is going to get in relation to last year's budget.
Okay, so we have quite a few priorities. As I mentioned, in this period that we're in, we're focused on economic and social recovery. We're focused on ensuring that we protect the vulnerable. We're focused on maintaining macroeconomic stability, and we're focused on providing the goods and services that we need for the state to function. And those services include national security. And as a result of that, national security remains the recipient of huge funds in the budget. I believe the number off the top of my head is over $80 billion, which would put national security at about 15% of our non-debt expenditure. And of that amount, $6.5 billion is going to be on capital investments in national security. And that's on top of $40 billion that we have allocated to national security's capital budget over the previous 4 years. So national security remains a priority. Clearly, where we are today, until we vaccinate our vulnerable population, the measures that are necessary to stop the spread of the virus will have to be maintained, and that retards economic activity, and that has a feedback effect on all of Jamaica. So we have to make sure that we fund the fight against the COVID pandemic, and that remains a key priority. But national security, after education is $114 billion, or 21% of the non-debt expenditure.
As I can see here, it's actually going up because it was previously $109 billion, and it's now up to $114 billion. Yes, so even with the cap, it's 1.4, which is up from 1.2. So within the realm of education, a lot of it, and I was reading what you put out on the matter of priorities, and I can see it right here that it actually is on there along with, especially Serve Jamaica. But what I'd like to know, when it comes to the budget, a lot of the complaints have been, especially in this new era of everything needing to be digital, children not entering school, digital divide. How does the budget speak to the need to, A, continue educating our citizens, keeping them on the same level as the rest of their peers within the rest of the world, but also getting to them the resources needed to actually be in the digital classroom?
So we are allocating $114 billion to education, which is 1 in 5 dollars of non-debt expenditure. Education expenditure is 6% of GDP. That is in the upper ends in the world in terms of what countries allocate to education as a percentage of GDP. In our income bracket, middle income countries, they allocate 4% of GDP to education, and we are at 6%. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have allocated $1.8 billion to a digital strategy to bring broadband and Wi-Fi to communities, to town centers, and to schools. By the end of this school year, meaning by the end of June, which is the first quarter of the new fiscal year, over 122,000 devices, digital devices, will have been distributed to persons in need, whether they're on path or they're not on path. And in addition, we have provided an additional $800 million on top of that in this new fiscal year, in addition to $189 million to the 63 constituency development funds. First, $114 billion to education, which is 1 in 5 dollars of non-debt expenditure, 6% of GDP. among the highest of any country in the world as a percentage of their economy to education. 122,000 devices, digital devices, will have been distributed to students in need on path, and some of them not on path, by June of this year. And in addition to that, $1.8 billion through the USF to provide Wi-Fi access and broadband in schools, communities, and towns. And then fourthly, $189 million to the Constituency Development Fund for the 63 constituencies where members of Parliament will be able to provide through e-learning vouchers for digital devices to needy constituents who did not receive in the Ministry of Education allocation, and that will provide a further 10,000 devices. And then $140 million through the Ministry of Local Government to the municipal corporations so that councillors can also provide to persons in need who have not been allocated, and that will see another 7,000 devices. So we have a multi-tiered strategy in terms of providing digital devices to Jamaican students who are in need.
Thank you. Well, obviously, as I said at the beginning, there have been not exactly raving reviews in some quarters. Others have made reserved comments. Mr. Phillips says that he's pretty much called the budget hopeless. Ralston Hyman says the budget needs at least $20 billion more. Oh, I'd like you to answer, at least address John Mafoud's point where he said that we can't just narrow our focus on primary surplus high and whittling down the debt. Do you think that's a fair assessment on his part? And if not, why not?
Well, I never mentioned primary surplus once in my presentation yesterday. You can read it for yourself. Look, we are in the middle of a pandemic. Our revenues declined by $70 billion this fiscal year, and those revenues are not going to recover right away. And yet we have to finance social and economic recovery. We've been very fortunate that the government will be receiving a dividend, a one-off dividend of $33 billion in the first week of April, which has allowed us to implement a $60 billion social and economic recovery with vaccines, a SERVE program that will generate jobs, stimulate economic activity, provide vaccines for the Jamaican population, and will help to get the recovery effort going and underway. And at the same time, we're making sure that Jamaica stays on a path where we can preserve our macroeconomic stability, because any injury to that would cause even more pain and make recovery that much more difficult, or that more difficult. So, our focus, as you'd have heard me in my presentation on Tuesday, is on economic recovery, is on social support, with a number of innovative programs to bring resources to people and at the same time transform our environment, improving the resilience of the Jamaican economy and of the Jamaican people.
I was thinking of the economy. I mean, some projections have a return to normalcy, quote unquote, by 2024. Others have it late 2022 or early 2022. You have said no new taxes. There has been a bit of a break for certain taxi drivers, and if they've already paid their car fees, they get a break where the government will pick up a part of the tab. Was there any room to expand that to breaks for entrepreneurs, for SMEs within the tax roll?
So the budget has, the Serve Jamaica program has a number of elements that is geared towards different segments of the Jamaican population. We have the Paint the City program, where we are going to beautify town centers in rural and urban Jamaica. The murals that you have seen pop up in Kingston, we're going to have 21 communities that are identified, places of high historical and cultural value, which will be totally re-engineered with the wonderful murals, as well as beautifying our sidewalks, doing of community parks, over $300 million that will see thousands of Jamaicans employed temporarily to beautify their environment. A river training program where we are going to get thousands of Jamaicans in rural Jamaica to build these gabion baskets that are useful in training rivers to stay in a particular course, reducing the risk of flooding while providing temporary employment.
Well, that speaks to infrastructure.
No, that's not what that. The infrastructure program is $31 billion on highways, on secondary roads, on main thoroughfares, on community roads, $1.7 billion for rural farm roads. That is where the infrastructure piece is coming on. I'm talking about social support programs that provide temporary resources to young people, but at the same time, those young people are engaged in something positive.
But I'm asking about entrepreneurs.
No, so I'm talking about our Serve Jamaica program. Just allow me to do so. You mentioned the $75 million for contract carriage operators, 5,000 of them who paid fees last year, license fees,
yes,
who the government will pay on their behalf this year. 15,000 route taxis who paid their license fees last year. The government will be paying a third of their license fees in this year. As far as persons over the age of 60, who are not in receipt of a formal income greater than $1.5 million and who are vaccinated, they can look forward to a grant of $10,000 from the government, and we expect over 100,000 Jamaicans to benefit from that. We expect 50,000 Jamaicans to benefit from the extension of the Set Cash Grant and the Best Cash Grant in the months of April, May, and June. Now, as for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, we have a number of things lined up. We have $2 billion going through the Bank of Jamaica, Development Bank of Jamaica, to set up equity funds, 2 equity funds, $1 billion each from the government, to be matched by private sector funds. The total funding we are projecting to be at $8 billion, with the government putting up 2, and those funds will be focused on equity, permanent capital.
So it's $8 billion, the government is putting up 2.
Putting up 2. Then we have $1 billion going to our MSMEs as well to provide support for the digital transition, the digital transformation of these SMEs. SMEs will be able to, the government will provide these resources, $200,000 in terms of grant and up to $800,000 in a 2% loan for them to acquire from IT service providers the e-commerce platform and the front end that they can transform their businesses from the bricks and mortar variety into an online variety that doesn't require physical interaction, but people can go online locally and overseas and acquire their products. And in addition to that, there'll be $2 billion of direct loans to MSMEs through the Development Bank of Jamaica. And in addition, if that were enough, we are ensuring that our MSMEs that are involved in export, and in particular in e-commerce export, small value items, candles, coconut oil, castor oil, paintings, craft, small manufactured items, and works from artisans, and so forth, that are being exported using air cargo, small shipments. The government of Jamaica is abolishing the customs administration fee that has been in place since 2013, that has been like a yoke around the neck of our small businesses, and we're putting it into the same wastebasket that the minimum business tax went into when we abolished it, and the asset tax for non-financial businesses. So we are focused on small businesses, and this budget has a lot of things that's geared towards the development and the prosperity of small business, because we know, because small business is at the foundation of the Jamaican economy.
Okay, so question now, the budget is projected at oil prices of US dollars $45 per barrel, but oil trade at $65 today. What does that mean? What does that do to the credibility of the budget numbers?
Right, so look, the budget is predicated on 12 months of the year, okay? So from April 1st of 2021 all the way to March 31st of 2022. We have had a spike in the prices of oil over the past few weeks, which is directly related to the freeze that happened in Texas a few weeks ago. Right? When you have weather activities like that, commodity prices that are related to major production areas are going to increase in price, and that's what we saw happen. The expectation is that the average price for the year is not likely to reflect where it is today. However, as I said yesterday in my budget presentation, and which is the reason for the approach that we have taken, is that Jamaica is exposed to risk. We're exposed to natural disaster risk. We're exposed to the risk of commodities, alumina prices, oil prices, soybean prices, wheat prices. All of these are commodities on which the Jamaican economy depends. And adverse movements in those prices, over which we have no control, can affect us. Now, I want you to understand something. You know, the oil prices have a monetary effect, and they have a fiscal effect. As far as the budget is concerned, oil prices, it's the fiscal impact that matters. Okay?
No,
And when it comes to the fiscal, you asked a question, you threw something out there. Allow me to finish. Oil prices, in terms of the fiscal impact, you know, the revenue that the government earns has a positive relationship with oil prices. So from when you ask the question about the credibility of the budget does not have an adverse exposure to oil prices.
We've got 90 seconds.
Okay? The adverse exposure is on the monetary side. So the budget, in terms of oil prices, if oil prices move in an adverse way, it doesn't affect the budget. It's in a straight pass-through. In fact, there's an inverse relationship.
So you are happy with this budget. Obviously, this is yours. This is your little baby. You birthed this bad boy. It's out there now. Moving beyond the budget, what I'd like to ask you about is the Bank of Jamaica and this entire thing of the CDBC. Now, how countries such as Kenya have done marvelous things with it, where if you're a coffee grower in the mountain, you have it on your phone, you go to the trader, you click it in, and it brings them in from the gray and the black markets, more in on the actual control of the central bank. And they now have proof of income. Countries such as Singapore, China, India have used them extensively as well. So now my question to you is, how long can we actually, before we see that become an actual viable part of our economy? We've got about 40 seconds, so just want to drop that.
We're in central bank digital currency. We are doing the prototype or the pilot this year. Cabinet just approved the acquisition of the software, and we expect central bank digital currency to be a reality in Jamaica next year. We have to amend the Bank of Jamaica Act to give the central bank the authority to be the sole issuer of central bank digital currency, and it will allow persons to transact using their phone. As I said in my budget presentation, the Sky Juice vendor, the person who is retailing food on in any establishment, including informally, as well as the person who is vending banana chips, will be able to collect on their phone and use that currency on the phone to purchase school books, to purchase pharmaceuticals, and to also transfer money to their children. So central bank digital currency that this government is going to launch,
that's the time
we are going to be able to revolutionize the economy and increase financial inclusion, bringing in hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans into the financial system in a way that will serve to strengthen our economy and to fast-track our development as a society.
Thank you very much, Minister. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.